Hi everyone, Sandra Duran Wilson here, and welcome to Mixed Media Soul Sparks. Every week I bring you mixed media techniques, inspirational exercises, and studio tips. This week I want to share with you the ins and outs of acrylic pastes and gels. So many times I see people working with acrylics and they never use any of these products. Have you ever walked into the art supply store and you see these walls of all of these different products and you wonder what they're for? Well, I'm going to show you 4 of them today. Just first, a quick little lesson on gels and paste. Gels are white when they're wet, but they're going to dry clear. Paste are also white when they're wet, but they stay white when they're dry. And we have different viscosities, like soft gel compared to, say, a heavy gel or a regular gel. Molding paste as opposed to a light molding paste. These are quite different products. And then there's heavy gel, and we're looking at matte as opposed to gloss. And there's everything in between. You don't have to get these big containers like I do. You can get smaller ones than this. So what I want to share with you is how to use these properties to really enhance your artwork or even to create an interesting background just using all of these gels and paste. So what I've done here is I just have a piece of mixed media paper. I gessoed it with red gesso so we can see the difference in the transparency and the opacity. That's another thing with the gels and the paste. The soft gel gloss or any of the gloss gels are going to dry very, very clear. If you're using a matte gel, you'll see that it dries more opaque. And the paste are opaque to varying degrees depending on how thick you put them on. So this one is the light molding paste. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put like blobs of them, that very technical term of blobs, and I'm going to spread them around. I'm not mixing them together. So that was the light molding paste. Thanks. And this is soft gel gloss. I like to clean the knife off so I don't contaminate what's in the jar. Now this is the one that's going to dry clear. And you can see how milky and soft it is, but this will dry completely clear, whereas this is going to dry more opaque. Now this one is the molding paste. And it's kind of a grayish white, not as bright of a white as the other paste. And it has a very different texture to it. As when I start to spread this, and especially after they're dry and I go to put the paint on, you're going to see how different they are. And here we have the heavy gel matte. Now, I'm not putting them in any particular order. I'm just putting that technical term of blobs in different places. And now I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to start to spread it. I want to get it moved around, kind of overlapping slightly, but I don't want to mix it to where it's homogenized. I don't want to end up with all the same consistency. I want this background to really accentuate the qualities of all these different products. So even as I'm doing this, you can probably see how some areas are more transparent already. And you can make this as thick, as smooth, or as textured as you want. I like to keep a little texture in here and just use my knife to move it around. And if you find you put too much out, just have an extra piece of paper around. Remember that from the other lessons where I call it the accidental masterpiece or your throwaway masterpiece when you have an extra piece of deli paper or canvas. And I'm just going around here looking to see if I have kind of the coverage and texture I want. I can even pick some up and move it to another area. So here's a tip with your knife. If you hold the knife pretty flat and kind of float it over the surface, you're going to move it. Whereas if you hold your knife at a high angle, you're going to remove it. Like that. And then you can bring it back over. So this is going to have to dry before we can do anything to it. And depending on how thick you put it on, it's going to depend on how long it takes to dry. But I've made another one. This one's already dry. And here, you can see I've already started to play around with some colors. And I just want to show you what I did in this area right in here, where you can see this texture. When my gel and paste mixture was probably about 3/4 dry, meaning that it was still a little squishy underneath, but the surface of it was dry. It wouldn't like stick to this paper. I took this corrugated cardboard and I just pressed it in like this, different directions. And then I used this wild tool that is, we just discussed on all the possibilities of what it could be. But I use this just to make indentations in here. Now, you could try it when it's really wet, but I think that the gels and the paste would stick to it too much. Here, it's just too dry. I can get a slight impression, but not much. So it's one of those Goldilocks things. It has to be just right. Not too wet, not too dry. So once you get that done, let it completely dry, and then you can start to experiment with colors. Now here's another one that I made a long time ago, and I keep it around just to play with different colors. And the main thing you want to discover is removing the color is just as important as putting it on. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to start with some yellow ochre. And again, we're, talking about transparency. Like here, when you look at this bottle, this is golden paint, and they do it on all their bottles. Those black lines, you can see how transparent or opaque that is. This one is transparent yellow iron oxide. You can see the difference. This is much more transparent. It also says that, so it's kind of a no-brainer. Now this one, very dark. You can't see those lines hardly at all. So we're going to work with that transparency, opacity. There's also the other thing of viscosity. And these are fluid paints, but you could also use tube or heavy body paints. This is a metallic paint from DecoArt. And I just need to mix it up a little because they do separate. It's really pretty, but I'll show you how much it separates, so you really get that yummy color. But you can see the different viscosity. It's much thicker. So I'll put a little of that over here. And get my brush, and I'm going to put out some of the transparent so we can just compare. So this is the regular yellow ochre, and here's the transparent one. It's hard to see much on top of the white, but if I put this over that blue that's already there, and here is the more opaque one. No, I got it backwards. This is a transparent one, and here is the opaque one. So that's pretty obvious. Now, why would I put that much paint totally covering up what I had before? So this is where the amount you take off really makes a difference. Now, of course, if I go in when it's wet, I can easily remove a lot of it. And I can start to see the texture better when I remove it. So that's the real key, is to put some on and then take some off. I'll just try some with this blue over here. And you see how that thicker viscosity goes on quite a bit different. Now, of course, you can always change the viscosity of your paint, either by adding some water or some medium, like the gloss medium. Let me just take some of this off. I call this the painter's dance. You put some on, you take some off. It's like step forward, step back. Now I'm going to dry this real quick. Let's see. Yeah, it looks pretty dry. So let's say your paint is very dry, and even like here, it felt like it's getting a little muddy. So I can use rubbing alcohol, spray some on my paper towel, and I can come back in here and remove a lot of that paint, even going back to some areas of white. But what I want you to notice is here, this is where that light molding paste was, and that's the most absorbent of all of the gels and paste. And it's going to be hard to remove that. But here where the molding paste was, easy to remove. Up in here where the gloss is where it's transparent. You can see that red. It's easy to remove paint on top of that. So this is how you work these surfaces. You just kind of keep coming back in with different viscosities. I had a lot of water on my brush. I'm almost getting a green now as I'm mixing that yellow in with that blue. It's giving it a nice rich color. I prefer to paint thin, translucent or transparent layers rather than a thick layer like this. I mean, it's got its place to do thick layers like that if you need to cover up a lot. This is what you'll do. Let me move my palette. But I think you get a little bit more interesting effects when it's a little more transparent. This is the other thing I want to show you, is building these layers. And this color, this is kind of a wild color. It's a fluorescent color, and they're a bit fugitive, meaning they fade out at times. So I use them very sparingly, and I just want this to kind of go into those recesses. And I'm going to put it on and wipe most of it off. But it adds just this little spark. You know, it starts to pick up some interesting things. The other part is you could come in with a darker color. This is a Payne's gray. Let me make sure this is dry. Okay, so I'm just going to add a little water to my brush and then come over that lighter blue with this darker blue. Now you can't get these effects if you're just trying to do this over a straight canvas or panel or paper. That's where the beauty of these gels and pastes can give you such an intriguing background. And just continue to play with this, to develop your color palette. Remember, taking some off is just as important as putting some on. And there's so many different gels and pastes to work with, but the main things you want to remember are the viscosity, so is it a soft gel or a heavy gel, the transparency. Is it gloss, satin, or matte? And is it a gel or a paste? And then we also get into other things, which are like gloss mediums. And that is more for creating a glaze or really reducing the opacity of a more opaque paint. So if you want to make this more transparent, you could dilute it with water or this gloss medium. So just this lesson alone, you could play with this forever. I mean, I put all of these products into my backgrounds, and it makes it so much more interesting that you, as you can see, you can just really develop these beautiful textures and colors. And remember that taking some off like this actually, I think, makes it more beautiful. So that's it for this week, and it's all about gels and pastes. If you like this video, please share it, and let me see you in the comments what questions you may have and other things that you might like to see in a future weekly Mixed Media Soul Spark. So thanks, Sandra Duran Wilson here. Join the community and share your creations on social. Use the hashtag Mixed Media Soul Sparks. I look forward to seeing your comments in the comment section.